Following the Taliban's stunning return to power in Afghanistan last month, many have looked for other Islamic militants who could emulate their success. Somalia's Al-Shabaab has been one such focus. Omar Mahmoud of the International Crisis Group recently co-authored an article in Foreign Policy about the group. While he sees many differences between Al-Shabaab and the Taliban, he does note similarities in the governments they oppose. He joins us from Nairobi, Kenya.
The Taliban and Al-Shabaab are obviously not very analogous movements. The Taliban's it was the governing entity for about 5-6 years in Afghanistan before. It's more focused, I think specifically within Afghanistan, and that's a big difference. We see Al-Shabaab has more regional, transnational sort of ambitions, or at least, it does conduct activities and operations outside Somalia's borders. And so that's a pretty big difference. And that ties into, how the region actually responds to these sorts of movements. So obviously the Taliban had a supporter and safe haven within the region that it operated in. That's not the same case for Al-Shabaab. The region is actually quite opposed to it as well.
Many have pointed to corruption in the former Afghan government as a key reason for the emergence of the Taliban. Somalia regularly tops international lists on corruption.
But when we look at, the broader similarity is that you have a state building project that is predominantly externally backed and externally dependent. And that goes for both sort of the governance side, but also the security side. I mean, we do have the region involved in here, but we have that being financed by Western partners, by the EU, UN-assessed contributions for the UNSOS logistical support unit to AMISOM. And so a lot of that money is coming from, the Western partners.
Afghanistan reportedly drained $2 billion from Washington's coffers.
You have growing fatigue. That's what drove sort of the U.S. pullout from Afghanistan, and some of President Biden's comments were very interesting in his assessments, and maybe he's kind of defending his position. But he would say things like, no matter how long we stayed in Afghanistan, we weren't going to change things. So it was kind of this frustration and this fatigue. And I think you see a similar level of frustration and fatigue when you're talking about international partners with regards to Somalia as well. We already see that in terms of funding for the AMISOM mission. It's increasingly becoming a challenge to secure predictable, sustainable funding for the mission. So this sort of whole election cycle and drama that's dragged on, for quite a bit of overtime, I think is also raising some questions around that.
There was no real alternative to the U.S. military in Afghanistan.
You get to the similar level where international partners pull funding, pull other sorts of support. Could the region, manage the security apparatus on their own? Potentially. But then again, that's Ethiopia, which is going through severe internal unrest, and that's also Kenya, which, this could become an election issue and whatnot coming up. And so, they've been involved in Somalia for quite some time. It's not certain whether that will always hold. And so if you remove all of those levers, what does that leave in Somalia? Do you have a similar sort of outcome?
Al-Shabaab cannot match the Taliban's popularity and experience in government. But its tactics still make it a dangerous force in Somalia.
We talk about how Al-Shabaab takes over any sort of area as soon as AMISOM or SMA kind of leaves. And they're in this dominant position. Now, could they extend that throughout the country? And that's kind of a key question. But I think it's one that's worth asking, and it ties into this larger question about whether these externally state-backed interventions really make sense or not.
ADN TV thanks Omar Mahmoud for once again joining us to discuss his views on Somalia's political and security future. ADN TV will continue to bring you expert opinions on Somalia and the Horn of Africa.